Happy Thursday, everybody. It's Ptony, your friendly Catholic vlogger. I think Silence by Scorsese is a great movie. It's about two priests named Father Garupe and Father Rodriguez. They're from Portugal, and they leave for Japan to do missionary evangelizing work. They make a lot of heroic sacrifices in their journeys, which is inspiring to be sure, but they also make a fatal mistake. A tragic flaw, if you will. They fail to really learn Japanese. That mistake compromises the whole mission of evangelization for these two priests, especially on some very personal levels. The two priests end up in very different places, both of which are not very desirable. Father Garupe is martyred for his faith, which is a good thing, right? But also, just to point out, Father Garupe was going to Japan to help win people over to the faith, right? He doesn't end up winning anybody over to the faith. He is killed before he's able to do that. And what's more, he gets a lot of other people killed. Intensely dissatisfying. Father Rodriguez, spoiler alert, ultimately he apostatizes. Which also is not very satisfying. Do either of them successfully evangelize Japan in any fashion? No. So the moral of the story is, hey, Ptony, if you want to get into evangelizing work, don't evangelize like these guys did. How do you like them apples? So why do I like the movie? Well, because it's a tragedy. Scorsese showed us a couple priests who went after a noble endeavor, but they had this fatal flaw. They had this tragic flaw, and that crippled their entire mission. That dissuades the viewer from following their example. These are not examples of priests that we should be like. All right, now I gotta clarify a bunch of stuff. Why is it that this is a fatal mistake? They didn't learn Japanese. Is that such a big thing? They kind of learned Japanese. Doesn't that work? No, it doesn't. The point is, not learning Japanese is, I mean that in a symbolic sense. The bigger issue is a little less concrete, but here it is. As a general attitude, these priests are looking to change Japanese people without having any intention to learn about Japanese culture more than what they have to. Here's a quote from Pope Francis, Joy of the Gospel, paragraph 117. In the evangelization of new cultures, or cultures which have not received the Christian message, it is not essential to impose a specific cultural form, no matter how beautiful or ancient it may be, together with the gospel. The message that we proclaim always has a certain cultural dress, but we in the church can sometimes fall into a needless hallowing of our own culture, and thus show more fanaticism than true evangelizing zeal. Here's the thing, Jesus died for us, right? That's a huge thing, and the faith he has given to us is for all peoples. Absolutely. He spoke Aramaic. We have a long tradition in Latin. Why is that? Well, because early Christians went to Rome and they looked around, and what did early Christians see people speaking? Well, they saw them speaking Latin. So they started translating the faith into Latin. And now at this point, Latin has all this history behind it, and so much depth and reflection about our faith is in Latin. So Latin has a new level of meaning, and that's beautiful. But still, there's this concept that the faith can be translated into new cultures. Look at the huge differences between the Roman Rite and the Byzantine Rite. This faith can be translated. Father Garupe and Father Rodriguez going into Japan expecting the Japanese people to change their entire way of living and learn their own language is presumptuous. And so, of course, everything falls apart. All throughout the movie, there's this dichotomy that's illustrated over and over again. There's Japanese culture and there's the Christian faith, and the two are incompatible. The Inquisitor insists on that over and over again. We start talking about Christianity as a tree, and we start talking about Japan as a swamp, and trees don't grow well in swamps. The roots rot. And this tension builds and it grows and is highlighted, and they talk endlessly about it. And ultimately, Father Garupe and Father Rodriguez each have to choose. Are they going to choose Christianity, or are they going to choose Japan? And for the longest time, Father Rodriguez insists, no, Christianity is the truth. The truth applies everywhere. Absolutely agree with that, by the way. But there's something missing with Father Rodriguez's approach. And that's why, ultimately, he can't reconcile Christianity with Japan. So he gives up Christianity for the most part, although, he has a crucifix in his hands when he dies. Well, whatever, nuance. Everyone loves nuance. So in other words, this tension that Silence builds up around the dichotomy of Japan on one hand and Christianity on the other. Did I switch sides on that? I don't know. My answer to all of that tension is dialogue. How come throughout the whole movie does nobody ask, what does it mean for Christianity to be lived out in a Japanese culture. Why is that not a thing? I mean, and, side point here, I don't think that this is the message that Scorsese is trying to communicate, because he doesn't address that thought of finding a healthy way to live out Christianity in a Japanese culture. He never brings that concept up. But I think that the true tension that this movie illustrates beautifully is not between Christianity and Japanese culture. Rather, it's between the European way of living out Christianity and Japanese culture. Father Rodriguez, Father Garupe went into Japan and they said, hey, this is our faith and you should have it too. And all of your Japanese culture, if it doesn't fit with our faith, get rid of it. Wow. That's a tough sell. Here's the most tragic bit, and I'll end on this. I don't think that that was Scorsese's point of the movie, right? Like I said before. The point of the movie, and I might be wrong on this, seems to be more along the lines of, Christianity, you gotta respect the fact that other cultures have their own thing going on, and at a certain point you gotta just let them be. Which of course is hard for a Christian who believes that Christ died for all people to accept, right? He paints this tension between Christianity and another culture, as if to just illustrate that sometimes, Christians, you gotta back out. Your faith doesn't fit here. And that is what is tragic to me. Why is it that people feel this tension, that people feel like there's a dichotomy between a culture and Christianity? That should not ever be a tension. As Christians, why aren't we known for being able to listen to another culture and learn how our faith fits into that? How Jesus came to this world to die for the people in that culture that we're dialoguing with. We used to do that. That's why we have Latin Mass. That's why we have Christmas trees on Christmas Day. That's why we celebrate the Nativity of our Lord on December 25th. Have we lost that? Do we still know how to do that? Do I know how to do that? I don't know. But that's the hope. Learn how to do that. All right, that's all I got. I hope you like this video. I'll see you next week. God bless and ciao. Couple disclaimers here. There's a lot more to this movie than I could ever process in a vlog. Like, I want to clarify that, hey, if you don't like the movie Silence, that's okay. I feel like I'm going out on a limb when I say that I like it. There's a lot of huge topics that come up in this movie that I didn't even begin to talk about. Like, for example, the principle of double effect, redemptive aspect of suffering. How does that fit into Scorsese's world? And most importantly, I did touch on this video, but I just want to say it again. I am not saying that Buddhism and Christianity are basically the same thing and to each their own. I am not saying that. I hope I didn't come across that way. I'm going to put links below to 2 other YouTube videos that are excellent reviews of this movie. One is by this guy named SteveTheMissionary. He talks about how this movie illustrates the pain of martyrdom in a way that is easy to forget about. Find that to be a powerful take. The other one is by this guy. You might have heard of him. His name is Bishop Robert Barron. And of course, all of his stuff is always good. All right, that's all I got. I'll see you next week. Bye. Wow. All right. I'm talking with my mouth full now. That's embarrassing.